Welcome to Full Throttle Talk, the podcast where horsepower meets conversation. From supercars to classic legends, high revving tech to motorsport mayhem, we cover it all. Straight from the driver's seat, whether you're a gearhead or racer or just love the thrill of the open road, you're in the right place. Buckle up, hit the gas, and let's go full throttle into today's episode. Welcome back to Full Throttle Talk. We've got a great show for you today. All the wonderful banter that you've gotten used to. And I want to start out by saying thank you to all of you who have been giving us such great feedback and great reviews on iTunes and Stitcher and Spotify and all the other places. We really sincerely appreciate it. Every time we get a little snippet of praise, we share it amongst each other, and I think we all celebrate in our own little individual ways. I'm in Puerto Rico. Greg is either in Ohio or traveling someplace, and Paul's primarily in California. And so we're all, you just know every time you give us some little, bit of, that a boy, that there's little celebrations going off in all corners of the country. So do keep it up. We appreciate it. And always, if you've got any show suggestions or ideas, direct message us over on Instagram. Instagram is quickly becoming our platform to disseminate any information. So that's the easiest way to communicate with all of us. And so without any further delay, guys, let's get rolling. Paul, Greg, let's get started with what is the greatest, coolest car thing that happened since last week's podcast that you'd like to share with everyone. And, I do want to start out by saying is that we're all doing the best job I think we can of sharing our automotive lives on Instagram, and nobody better than Mr. Paul Kramer, because you put up a video yesterday, which I've already watched 3 times, of some poor sap balling up an absolutely gorgeous slate gray 911.
Yeah. It was on Fridays for most who know me. I check out in the morning. That's my time. I leave at 6 a.m. and I drive up to Newcomb's Ranch, which is up in the Angeles Crest. And I've been doing that for 7-8 years. I do it probably 3 or 4, almost every Friday, unless I'm out doing a rally. And yesterday I was using it as winter testing for my 944 because I've got a rally coming up with that. And I just put on 3 new tires because we missed a tire, but free tires from Pirelli. I can't argue. They're our sponsor. And I thought it'd be great because I knew it was going to be wet. I knew it was going to be a little icy, and I just wanted to see how it was. But there was a few people who came up there that weren't really aware of it. And that video you saw with Jay Ryan, he basically saw the guy hit ice and do the worst thing you can do in a 911, which is hit the brakes. And 911s and 356s are actually amazing in snow, even if they have not snow tires on, because of the rear engine weight. But the worst thing is you hit the brakes, you have no steering, no nothing. And he just did a 20-mile-an-hour slide right into the embankment, which fortunately another 30, 40 feet, and he would have been off the side of the mountain. So, it's a project that I think that kid has been putting together for a while, and it's, pretty close to done, kind of a 911R vibe to it. It's funny. Jay got out. He was fine, and he goes, "Are you all right?" He goes, "No, I'm not all right."
Well, he wasn't. It was
and
sad.
the worst part was, Jay and I were talking about, the car was running, the front wheels would move. I think he could have just driven carefully down the mountain. He didn't move the car at all, and everyone was trying to get him to move the car. And as a result, I don't have the video, but I took it on way down. A new late model Toyota Supra ran into the car.
No.
Yeah. And now that they were kind of tangled up, and it was also another low speed 5-10 mile an hour sliding on ice into each other, they couldn't get out of the way. And the snowplow was like, "You got to get out of the road." And the snowplow moved them. So I'm sure the snowplow work will not buff out. But good news is no one hurt. But it was really, really slippery up there. Really slippery.
Well, hopefully future show sponsor Haggerty, are you listening? Hopefully it's going to take care of them right away, and I'm sure they will. By the way, we have a little contest, and I haven't won the contest yet. So just so you know, I don't know the answer. So above Paul's right shoulder, there is an odd car that is not a Volkswagen Scirocco. I already made that mistake. And don't say it, Paul. We're going to we'll try to have some fun with it. So thank you. So if you know what that odd car is, no hints, Mr. Kramer, direct message us on, obviously on Instagram, and then whoever the winner is, we'll give you guys a shout out on next week's podcast, because I haven't guessed it yet. And I'm going to guess. Look at Greg.
If I guess,
don't say it out loud. Don't say it out loud.
But if I
Okay.
guess it, do I get a shout out on next week's podcast?
You do, but if you know what it is, which I seriously doubt if you do, but if you
Okay.
do, you do, okay, then you text us right now, and and we'll say, and Paul will say whether you got it right or not.
I'll
'Cause
text
I
you
don't know.
after, since I'm using my phone. I'll text you after.
Oh, you know what he's doing? He's firing up the chat GPT. He's taking a flip and finding out.
Yeah.
That's 100% what he's doing. Well, so we have a whole bunch of different topics this week, and one of the first topics. I'm sorry, Greg, you are you were at auctions. You were at Amelia Island. I watched the Amelia Island auction last night for Gooding. You were live streaming. You walked around Renworks. Was it Renworks? I think it was.
Werks Reunion.
And I watched your entire video, and I thought you did a really great job of kind of showing off all the things. There was a collection of sepia. Am I saying it right, Paul? Brown. Somebody had ordered a Spider RS and two other 992 911s in sepia brown with yellow trim. Let's just start there. What other highlights from walking around in the show field and maybe even from the auction? Because I know you must be somewhat exhausted from all that walking around.
Well, so I know this isn't a Porsche podcast. I love Porsches. We seem to talk a lot about Porsches. But one of my highlights was a Porsche. And I'll send you all the pictures because without Paul, I don't know that I would have stopped and taken a picture. But I fell in love with the car yesterday. You probably know it because I texted you a picture of it. But that Martini liveried 944 Turbo with the matching shoes. I thought that was one of my highlights yesterday from Werks Reunion. Paul, any comments on that? Is that the best 944 Turbo out there, like that version?
You know, it's not an official,
well,
we got to start. It's not an official version, Greg.
It's not an official version. Tim's
not.
right. No.
No.
But, like Gulf livery, Martini was, what Gulf livery was to 70s cars, Martini was to 80s cars. But they did make a Martini edition, but it was a 924. So I think it was like the Audi era. So it wasn't that great, but it had a really cool livery on it. And it really kind of came off of the like the rear orders and sort of into a narrow thing. This just looks like someone having fun. Looks like they have the red hemorrhage package interior. So it's probably everywhere. But
so you're squashing my excitement for you. Because I thought it was pretty cool, not knowing it was not a real deal thing. So.
Oh wait, and the shoes, he had matching shoes, and he put so just a little thing, and I'm sure this will be controversial, but 944 ownership as an owner, we are basically the very Corvette adjacent. We do the similar things. We have our trophies, we wear our jorts, we have our matching jorts, yeah. So yeah, this is, we're like a little more sophisticated. We're like a Chablis version of the Corvette owner.
Okay. Well, I do have another highlight from this morning.
Hold on. I can't get away from that. If that's the Chablis owner, what's the Corvette beverage beverage of choice?
Budweiser.
Okay, I got it.
Caps Blue Ribbon, Budweiser.
You think in your mind, the natural extension from a Budweiser is a Chablis. That's how your brain is connected when it comes to fine, wines and alcohol.
Well, that's a 944 owner is sophisticated. So they're not going to have a Cabernet or something from the Tuscan region. They're going to have a Chablis, which is, they've graduated from a white Zin to Chablis. So that's 944 ownership is a facade of sophistication. That's so
the 944 owner being one, where does he get his wine? Does he go to, is it, from a box?
Yeah, I would say usually a box. And if it's a special occasion, it will be a twist top.
Okay. All right. There we go. Now we've cleared that up. So if someone's listening just while they're grocery shopping and they happen to have a 944, that we've now given them a suggestion. Okay.
Has anybody ever milked a wine box before, like I did last week? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, like trying to get every last drop out of it.
Yeah, you got to pull it out of the box, and then you got to squeeze it like you're squeezing an udder, and there's like a whole glass in there.
What do you drive?
Greg, it might benefit, being from Ohio, I say this as a brother, okay? It might benefit you not to tell stories like that so frequently. because that's immediately going to tag you from Ohio, and then I'm going to feel, obligated to jump in and defend you. So
Yeah.
those types of things happen in certain parts of the country, but they don't happen in others. And so maybe,
Does that mean we're cutting that out, or are we going to leave it in?
No, and I think though we're
I'm going to leave it in totally.
we're going to reach a whole new
'Cause-
market of Zamboni owners are going like, yeah, I do that.
because
Yeah.
Greg, I've done it. So I totally understand. That's the reason I'm suggesting that, we maybe keep our Ohioanness to ourselves sometimes, because we'll intimidate other people with our high level of sophistication.
Okay. Well, if you've milked the wine box, give me a shout out. Okay.
Yeah.
I do have another really special thing I saw this morning, and you guys crapped on my other car, so you'll probably crap on this one too, but that's okay. Radwood, on my way into Radwood at the Amelia just like 2 hours ago, they have all the 80s cars, and I ran across my sister's high school car, and you never see them, a Nissan 200SX.
Ooh, because they've all turned into drift cars now, right?
Yep.
Well, you don't even really see those as drift cars. You see the 240, but
Oh.
an answer is yes. But even with drift cars, you never see them. Like they're just the 200 just is non-existent. But I saw a gray one today. I took some pictures, sent it to my sister. She had a red one.
Yeah. Well, yeah. What's the generation from those 90s cars that was rear wheel drive? Was that one, or was it the one that Paul just mentioned?
The
One of them was-
240.
Yeah.
That's the Silva.
Silva was the JDM, like the Gran Turismo version was the Silva. But so the 200, was that front wheel drive, automatic?
No, it was rear wheel,
Okay.
6 manual, great car.
Was it like a notchback or like a hatchback? It was a notch,
It was
right?
a hatchback. Yeah. I'll send you guys pics. Yeah, we put it on our IG. Yep.
So
that was
anything
very
else?
exciting to see that, because I've been trying to find one for years, and that's the only one I've seen in the last 15 years.
So anything else from the amazing weekend that you're, giving all of us FOMO for not having attended, that really stands out? And can we talk about the auction a little bit last night? Because you and I were talking about that in text.
Well, so I went to the Gooding for a little bit. It seemed to be a little bit reserved. I walked in there during the RUF Yellowbird, which went for $5.5 million. That was a really cool car. But someone leaned in and they said, that's getting close to, 60s short wheelbase Ferrari money. And he's like, which would you rather have? Well, I'll take a short wheelbase Ferrari. I mean, those are usually 8 to 12. But yeah, it seemed a little bit reserved. There wasn't a ton. It was decent. And I didn't go to the Broad Arrow, but I did have someone walk up to me today and said that yesterday they did have a good sale. I looked at the results. A lot of stuff was under low estimate. I think it's just uncertainty in the market with all the tariff talk flying around. I think in January, I think people were letting loose the purse strings. They were excited the presidential election was over. They were starting to look forward to this year, and then all the financial stuff that's been happening since, I think everybody's kind of clamped down again because it's very unsure as far as what's happening with jobs and all sorts of stuff right now, trade wars and everything else. So
let's talk about some of the ones that you and I were talking about. And if you don't want to, because you're in the business, if you don't want to feel like you're saying anything, to make somebody feel bad potentially, then I totally understand it. Okay.
Sure.
But what I was noticing was that the auction result, all the estimates were high, but at the same time, the cars were all no reserve. So most of them were no reserve. So if I am putting my car for sale as a seller, one of the best ways for me not to want to list it with a particular auction house is if they're telling me it's not worth what I think it's worth, right, Paul?
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, you have to placate the seller's ego sometimes because they happen to have a Nissan 200, whatever the hell it is, and they think it's worth more than everybody else's, right? So you have to somewhat tell a seller what they want to hear as far as pricing. And my perception was, and I could be wrong, and if you guys think I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong, but I don't think the auction house really gives much of a hoot what the auction estimate is. If the auction itself is no reserve, what do they care? If they placate the seller by giving the seller a happy dandy number on the catalog, but when it's, they're going to get paid no matter what, I felt like that was what was actually happening. A little competitive auctioneering for the sake of getting the listings. Comments?
I would disagree a little bit in that I know I've had these discussions. If you put the estimates too high, whether it's to placate or not, you're driving away bidders because, they're like, well, I'm not going to bid up that high, and so I always try to get my estimates where the hammer falls dead estimate is my goal. Um, I mean, I'm sure there's some other stuff I'm not aware of, but like I had one car in Miami, the estimate was 350 to 450, and thankfully it hammered right at 350, which made it the second most expensive dual gear to sell in the last 4 years, I believe. So I was super
And
thrilled.
absolutely a gorgeous car. I don't even know anything about dual gears, but if you guys want to see an absolutely stunning car, I put pictures of it on Instagram, but you should go to RM's auction catalog from Moda Miami and look at that thing. I mean, seriously, Greg, that thing was stunning. Whoever did the restoration work on that, it was one of the nicest restored cars. The gaps, everything was just sublime. Anyway, go back to your, sorry.
Yeah, I'll put some pictures. We rolled it out and put the top down in the sun, and you think the pictures online look good, man. In the sun, it was just unbelievable. So yeah, so I know at least when I deal with folks, I'm trying to get that estimate as accurate as possible. And I'll tell you a funny story. I actually lost a collection. I won't say to who, and it was a 52 car collection, and they took my estimates to the penny when they sold them, except for three cars. The three Ferraris, which were multi-million-dollar cars, they lowered the estimate, which I thought was interesting. Otherwise, because I think they figured they're not great at selling Ferraris, and they just wanted to put a more realistic estimate on it. But yeah. Anyways, it is really really difficult to do estimates. It's really, so you mentioned most of them sold under low estimate, or the estimates are a little high. It's just difficult when you have the years we've been having recently. Like Paul can attest to this, like 6 months ago, that might have been $100,000 car, but 6 months later, maybe it's not, maybe it's 120, maybe it's 80. Like keeping your pulse on the trends is pretty difficult, And so when you're talking to a client and you're talking estimates, it can become difficult. And I will tell you, I know from RM's perspective, they don't want to take a car unless they know it's going to sell, or feel very strongly that it's at a right number. It's very close to what the market is demanding, and it's going to sell, because they don't want to do a 60% sell through rate. They want to do a 90% sell through rate.
Well, but what I'm suggesting is if you're going to sell it no matter what, because there's no reserve, I mean, the estimates are not really that important, other than you're saying if the estimates are too high, they're going to run buyers off, which I can understand. But if the buyer knows that it's a no reserve auction, they don't care what the estimates are. They're just going to pay whatever they feel the market value is. So it's just an interesting observation. It's a strategy. Yeah. It's a marketing strategy. I'm sure at the end of the day, and you kind of just touched on it too.
Like I've never had someone give me direction on an estimate. I submit them, and what I do is I'll take like the 5 most recent comps, the closest I can get, come up with a ballpark. I don't take the highest, I don't take the lowest. I come up with a ballpark. I submit it to 3 other car specialists to get their blessing, and you send it into the auction manager. And I've had them, now I'm not talking no reserve cars, I'm talking cars with a reserve. I've had them increase the estimate as many times as they've decreased it, because they're trying to be as accurate as possible. So that dual gear, when I submitted that and I did the comps, I submitted it at $300,000 to $400,000, where the auction manager said, "Man, this thing's, yes, that will be one of the most expensive ever sold, but you need to increase the estimate to 350 to 450 because the car deserves it." And thankfully, it hit the low estimate. So,
yeah, well, I mean, something more to think about and learn. I'm sure it's kind of fascinating. I mean, Paul, you're even a more perilous condition, because if you take something on consignment, and it doesn't sell, you just don't get paid, and you put a shit ton of work in every one of your
hey,
listings.
this is family friendly.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So,
you're right.
So no, and that's exactly it. And I'll get people who their mechanic gave them a value, their friend gave them a value, someone who isn't really tied into the market and how volatile it is. And then they'll tell me, well, so-and-so said it should be this. And I tell them, there's other dealers that are my competitors that they'll tell you whatever you want to hear, because statistically they know that once they have the car, they're in a position of leverage emotionally. So, for me, though, like you said, Tim, I mean, each car you see on our website from beginning to end is 50 hours of my time, from beginning to end, working with the seller, working with the buyer, coordinating all the repairs, doing all the social media and the marketing. And so at the end of the day, if we're not seeing eye to eye on value, there's no way I'm going to take it. If it's under a certain value, probably similar to what, RM and some of the other auction houses do, they're not going to take it. It's just, not only is it a waste of everyone's time, there's a potential we're going to hurt the value by going back to like, not getting an offer or chasing the market down like in real estate where you just keep lowering the price. And now I will say though, in the last probably 18 months, the disparity between the range of what I think it'll list for and what I think it'll sell for, which, 3-4 years ago was very narrow. Now it's getting wider, and it's not just me. Even when you look at late model stuff like, let's say a 991.2 GTS or something like that. You'll look at what the dealers are offering for the car versus what we think retail is. I'd say that delta between what a dealer is going to buy wholesale versus what they think it might sell is probably gone, from maybe 15% to 30%, just because they're nervous of sitting on inventory. And so I'm seeing that just in all these different data points.
Yeah, I'm sure, because a lot of these guys that are using floor plan money are, and the interest rates, I'm sure, huge that they can get. So floor plan, you want to explain that, Paul? Because I know you don't use a floor plan. You're just doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
that?
even when we first started, we basically didn't use floor plan because it's a slippery slope. But if you're a big dealer, you're going to auctions, you're buying inventory, wholesale used inventory. There's companies out there that'll be gladly lend you enough money to hang yourself, and they're like 30, 60-day notes, I think, on average. And so the interest rates are okay because it's only a 30, 60-day note. But if you go over those notes, I mean, the interest rates get extreme, and that's why you'll see dealers just have to dump inventory, throw it at auction, get rid of it. And early on, my dad and I were like, we're not going to do that. We're going to focus on specialty cars. And eventually, I would say after the first year or two, 90% of our inventory became consignment, which is great for me because you can make more money by buying the inventory, but ultimately, I'm never stuck with someone's bad old car. I mean, that's ultimately the thing. And because if you're a dealer and you're buying all these cars, eventually, statistically, you will get a bad car. And then what do you do with it? You throw it away. You're going to sell it to someone. And regardless of how clear you are on the deficiencies of that car, 3 owners down the road, they're not going to remember all the important details. They'll just remember that, Auto Kennel sold me this car. And we had a couple of those 10 years ago, and it wasn't worth the effort.
All right, so I'm going to make sure that we stick to what we promised we're going to stick to, which is the worst rated car, or the most overrated car. But
Yes.
before we did that, you guys have both told me things in between our recordings that I want to address. And the first one is we had a listener question. It's in alignment with what we were just talking about. And the listener question, the gist of it was this person is thinking about buying an early 70s, maybe a 69 long hood, and they want a 911, and they want it to be an S, right? And so I suggested he just goes to Hagerty's website and have a look. But I know Hagerty's reporting on the past, and I'm wondering, do you guys have any sense of what's going on with the value of those things now? Start out with a 1, 2, and 3, maybe rated car, and then let's not assume that anyone knows what the hell those different ratings mean too.
Right. I mean, I would say the biggest difference I see. So you have a 1, and actually more than Hagerty, sports car market I liked better because it was a series 1 to 5. 1 to 4 left too much room. But I tell people, number 1 is like Pebble Beach. Like that car is going to go on the lawn at a level, something very important condition-wise, very original. There's a little bit of room for error if it's very original, and restored if it's restored. Number 1, I mean, most people rarely outside of the Concours environment see a number 1 car. Number 1 minus is a number 1 car that's maybe aged out a little bit, still really good, but just a little bit of age. I would say, for instance, Auto Kennel, most of the cars we get are ranges 2 minus to 2 plus. A lot of people think a 2 to 2 plus is a Concours car. I call that a very high level driver. And 3s, you start to see some wear, something big. And generally 4s, now you need it might be a restoration candidate. So that's kind of the general frame of, I think the condition level is. Regarding an S, and this I think is happening with a lot of important cars. When I get someone who wants to buy an S, the only reason you really should buy an S for most people is you want a Concours, a condition 2 plus and higher condition. Because if you're just an enthusiast and you just want to experience an air-cooled 911, a T, an E, a Hot Rod 911. I mean, there's no discernible differences besides the badge and obviously some of the mechanical bits, which even that you can't see except for a red shroud. So there's so few identifiers. So what you're seeing, especially like in the early S market, this disparity between a level 1, 2+ to 1 condition, and then there's this big gap down to 2- 3, which is why the Haggerty one's a little bit tough.
Right.
Like perfect example, we just sold a 69S and a 71S, both numbers. And by the way, with early S's, if you're not getting numbers matching engine, why bother? Really? I mean, that's all the values in that. I think it's foolish, but that's what the market says. But we just sold a 69S coupe, and it was, I would say, a condition 2 to 2+, and that sold for 170 or 165. We had another one that was a light ivory that was a 70S, maybe a 2 to 2-, like a half a grade lower, and that sold for 165. Now, the 69 was silver plus, 69 model year, less desirable, 2-liter versus 2.2-liter. A 71 was light ivory, less desirable than silver, and I think the 69 condition was a little better, fresher restoration versus older restoration. But right now you can see in the background this Targa that we're getting ready. This is a 73S Targa, numbers matching, silver. Now it's a Targa. Targa compared to coupe is less value on the enthusiast driver level. When you get to Concours, it matters less, and if it's a soft window, it's worth more. It's just the weirdness of the market. But when you get to a driver grade 2-, 3+, Targa values are less. This car is 73, numbers matching, a nice driver. It's going to be in the 130s. So 73 is more desirable than 69 or 70. And I always tell people, there's so many variances in condition. It's fundamentally a good car, good chassis, motor's good, all that stuff, but it's just when you get down to the details. And that's why you see this disparity between really exceptional cars and just drivers. And there's fewer examples that are in between, and there's fewer buyers. So I always say it's sort of this low supply yet low demand. And it's always like, is the demand one more than the supply to keep the value stable, or is it one less where they just seem to, that silver T or silver S, it's going to sell for not much more than a 71T we just sold.
These cars, the prices on these things for, like, let's just say a 2+ or a 1-, long hood S, they've been pretty stable for a long time. I think they peaked when you and I were doing our restorations,
Yeah.
And after that, I think the prices the floor came out on them. I know my car, my 67S that I got from Magnus, was slate gray, red. You sold it, you resold
tried to sell it, gave it back to the owner.
So that car had the engine been matching, would have been easily, when we sold it, 350 grand. And what year was that? Do you remember? 2011?
It was 2015. No,
15.
2000.
Wow. Okay.
So the peak of the market was really 13 through 16, and then it fell off a cliff. Like if you look at Scottsdale auction 17, it was very clear the party was over. If you really were granular, you got a glimpse of it in August in Monterey in 16. There was like everyone, it was sort of like denial. We didn't want to admit that the party was a little bit over. But like you said, the market, while 90s and GT3s and all this newer stuff went crazy during pandemic, the long hood market stayed kind of stable except for the peak condition cars, like the rare fully restored soft window 67S or something. Yep. Or astronaut car or whatever. But no, the peak for that was 15, and during that peak there was such a frenzy that the fact that your engine wasn't numbers matching, yes, it had a big price impact, probably 100 grand, would you say? 75 grand?
Well, we ended up selling it. I mean, we netted off that what we had in it. We didn't make a nickel on it. But the auction house, I actually don't even know for sure what they retailed it for, what they sold it for. But I think they sold it for 230, 225 or 230.
220, because my client bought it.
There you
they
go.
Bought it for 220.
Right.
And they didn't know until I told them that it wasn't numbers matching. And that was 4 years later, 5 years later.
That's crazy.
So but it really was to the point that people were in such a frenzy to buy stuff that, yeah, they took this price deduction for non-numbers matching, but they bought it anyway. I would say the difference today is they're going to look at numbers matching. If it's an S and non-numbers matching, they won't even glimpse at the non-numbers matching because it's like, why do I buy that car?
And just for the record, that car was for sale recently. And if you're happen to be the owner and you happen to used to play baseball, I think we know who we were talking about. And you want to sell that car for the high bid that it was at the Mecum auction last year in Monterey. Look me up, direct message me on Instagram. I'll happily buy it for the high bid. And yes, I did try to get hold of Mecum to have them make an offer to you, and no, they didn't actually do it. So just for what it's worth, I would happily buy that car back. The VIN number ended, if I remember correctly, in 305S, just for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Yeah, thank you for that. That was great. So listener question answered thoroughly. And there you go. So I would say, based on what you just said, if you're looking to buy a long hood S, it's a coupe. It's going to be numbers matching. Buy one that's got a little bit of use on it, so you don't have to basically worry about bubble wrapping it. And if it's a 2+, drive it down to a 2. If it's a 1-, drive it down to a 2. Have fun with it, because you're probably not going to lose any money on it. You probably might even make some money on it. Rolling in, you guys know about that roof auction. We talked about that roof sale, the Yellowbird. That's selling for $5.5 million. What does that do to roofs as far as values go? What effect does that have? Because roof is always, I mean, we agreed last podcast that if we were to buy a hot rod 911, that'd be the one to buy. I think all three of us agreed to that.
Yep.
Well, I'm curious now that one had hit it out of the park, and then the balls kept going. What does that do to roof values in general? Let's start with Greg on that one, because he's Mr. Auction.
That'll be interesting to see, because I believe the low estimate was $6 million. I might be wrong on that, but I think it missed the low estimate. But still, incredible result for sure. I think there's a groundswell of, I don't know how much that will affect it, but I think there's a groundswell of roof appreciation right now. I interviewed Johnny Lieberman recently, and I asked him, which do you want, Singer roof or Gunther Works? And he eventually, I believe it was roof. But anyways, I think there's a big groundswell with roof support happening right now, and I think we'll see a lot more yellow ones come to market after that one, whether they were yellow or not. So I think that will be interesting to see. You know,
was that the actual magazine car? Was that maybe one of the reasons it sold for that much?
I honestly, I didn't read.
I think it was.
If it wasn't, it was like one of two.
I mean, the thing about that car, and you sit there going, I don't know if it'll affect future roof cars. It was such an icon for X-Gens. You know, it was the first kind of like hot rod that beat the manufacturers at their own game. And I mean, that woke up Porsches were ubiquitous in Southern California, but that woke up about Porsches, you know, it was in every magazine. And then famously, when you could get video, like maybe late 90s, early 2000s, we finally saw the tire ad where the guy just drifts the Yellowbird around the Nürburgring, which is mind-blowing. Like, we're talking 100-mile-an-hour drifts. I mean, insane. I think it's one of the two cars. So I think it's an anomaly. I mean, they made, 19 Yellowbirds in the end?
I think that's right.
Yeah. So, you know, and here's the other thing I think pushes the value. And Greg, you probably can say more to this. It's not just, okay, how rare the car is, how desirable the car is, but I also think it's who already owns that car. So like Bruce Meyer has that car. And you look at these guys that are considered by collectors, astute collectors, even though they ironically will only call themselves enthusiasts, but they're freaking collectors. You know, Bruce Meyer collects, you know, significant race cars that won something significant. And for him to go, and he has mostly Ferraris and Corvettes and other things, and him to have that Porsche, if you're a collector out there going, well, if it's good enough for Bruce, it's good enough for me. So I think also the short wheelbase Ferrari is part of why it gets pushed up. I think the McLaren F1 is kind of the same thing. Any of these really special cars that are really finite, I think who already owns one speaks volumes, especially if they've owned it for a long time.
Well, that's an interesting question, but Greg, you guys, I have noticed not just RM, but a lot of the auction houses very, very rarely will brag on the past ownership. And I think what Paul said is true. It definitely gives, in my, opinion, it definitely gives the car more value when it has had a pedigreed, ownership. So
we will, and I've seen it numerous times. Usually it's older cars, like, pre-war Mercedes or something like that, where they were in, it's like the fourth time it's been sold. Here's the three previous owners were all mega collectors. And part of that is you got to get the permission from the guy who's selling it, right? So I know of some really big cars that have sold by noted collectors, but you don't know that because they don't, unless you know that car really well. They don't want it advertised. Like, and I still don't know why, but I believe it was a Mecum. You know, David Letterman last year, I believe it was, sold most of his collection off, and none of it was advertised as David Letterman. I forgot what it was called, the Velocity Collection or something. And you know, that was kind of quiet hush hush. And I'm like, well, that would have brought quite a bit more money if people knew they were buying David Letterman's Dino or his little twin cam MG. You know, but just for privacy reasons, he didn't want that known. But obviously, since then, it's come out, and if you can find one of those David Letterman cars, it's kind of a neat story attached to it.
Well,
I'll take his Volvo with the Volvo wagon with the.
But that was Paul Newman's. Didn't he get that from Paul Newman or
they both got him? They both got one.
So, but it is interesting, listeners, and I don't know if you guys are vibing with what we're talking about, but Paul, and you mentioned that if it's an astronaut-owned car, you just said it really quick. And that's just simply is because a lot of these, you know, all the, you know, missions were going off in the late 60s, early 70s. A lot of the astronauts had Corvettes, and they also had 911s. Yep. And I remember there was a Gemini Blue. You've actually participated.
I sold a 67S that was owned. It was a Gemini program astronaut. Yep. I wish I could remember his name, but it was a 67S slate gray factory sunroof. We're like talking rare air, and we sold it in 2007. And it was never a condition one unless when it was new. It was sort of a survivor, like one older repaint, but a lot of originality, like interior temperature gauge, had all kinds of really crazy options. Leather interior, might even had electric windows, and it had all the, not only the documentation from the astronaut that owned it, but like his license plates when he was in Texas, which is where the car was registered, said MSC 911 MSM, Manned Space Mission or Manned Space Center 911 on his license plates. And it had a crazy story how my friend who had the car had to help him sneak it out in the middle of the night because they were going through a divorce and the car was going to go away. And it had an insane story. And we struggled to sell that car for 70 grand in 2007. Wow. Sold it to a guy in Europe. He took it to Porsche, and this is the beginning of Classic starting, where they're doing restorations officially. My friend who did our logo works at Porsche. He'd send me pictures. He's like, the guy at the time was spending 200 grand on the restoration. But you think about it, 2008, 9, the economy went to crap, and he's spending 200 grand on what was maybe a $100,000 car restored. And I think it did sell at auction in Europe in the peak for like over $500,000. But it was an insane car. It was like arguably one of the most collectible 67S's. You know, not quite Steve McQueen, you know, long hood 911, but it was up there.
So how many astronaut Corvette C3s have you sold?
None.
I'm just trying to get outside of Porsche a little bit, but yeah. Nice.
No, I don't think they survived after the astronauts had their way with them.
Yeah.
Well, didn't they have to give some of those back? Weren't some of those special lease deals or something?
There's a couple out there, and they have kind of wild, interesting paint jobs on them, like a big arrow, kind of like a yellow triangle on the side or a white triangle on the side or something. They're interesting. Yeah.
All right. So I heard a rumor, and I'm not going to say who I heard the rumor from. And the rumor is about Jerry Seinfeld's Porsche 917. Okay. So the rumor is, I sent this to you guys in text, and I asked if you guys were cool with me talking about this, and you didn't bring it up. So the rumor is that Dana Meekum bought the car. And the question is, and I was explaining this to my wife, and she said, well, why, what's the story with that? And he probably, this is me speculating, and you guys can shoot it down, and listeners, make sure you can, tell me no in comments on Instagram. It's perfectly fine. But I suspect that Dana wanted the car, obviously, for himself. And by putting a reserve on it of 25, or having it be a no sell at 25 grand, he also effectively established a bottom of the price for the car. And I would venture a guess that we will see that car come for sale in Monterey this year, and it will sell for at least 25 million. And that Dana probably arranged a sale with Seinfeld, where obviously there was going to be some margin left for Dana when he went to resell it. And that's my thesis and my theory. But I've heard from 3 different sources that Dana Meekum was the person that ended up buying the car. And God bless him, honestly. I mean, that's a baller move of all the moves you could make as an auction house. Yes, I'll put the car for sale. I will buy it if we cannot get a certain number. You know, that's the perfect situation for a seller. But do you guys have any opinions on that? Have you heard those rumors yourselves?
I have not heard the rumors, but I mean, it is a baller move because he's basically putting all the risk out there. Jerry Seinfeld has nothing but upside. And I mean, what if we don't know what the next 6 months are going to look like? It's been volatile. We know that. I mean, this is a volatile time. And, you know, I guess he's got a long enough runway to float $25 million maybe for a little while. Because you can't run into too many more auctions, right, Greg? Otherwise, you're going to hurt the value.
No, and wouldn't surprise me. I mean, Dana's doing fine. He's got plenty of money. He's got such an incredible business. He's actually here right now. I just saw him 30 minutes ago. So it would not surprise me because at that level, it's a great marketing tool. Like, since he announced it in Monterey last year, that thing's been all over the place, and I'm sure it's bringing in some higher dollar consignments because that's where the Seinfeld Porsche was being consigned, so like it's a great move, if you have the financial flexibility to do so.
Financial flexibility.
I know. I love that term too.
I love financial flexibility on $25 million.
Yeah. But I think I mentioned this a couple of podcast episodes ago, is like, I can only go by what I see. And last year at Kissimmee, or now was it 2 years ago? Anyways, you had the big, Ferrari Nart Spider that did not sell. And the rumor was around that Dana had bought that beforehand. And I don't know if that's true or not, but he's here showing at Amelia that Nart Spider with his name as the owner. And he's standing right next to it. And I had seen him at the Wisconsin National Ferrari Show last year. And so do I know that he bought that to consign it? I don't know, but it didn't sell and he owns it. So, you can kind of 1 + 1 sometimes equals 2. Yeah. So I don't know. We'll see. My gut would be is if he does own it, we won't see it for a number of years. I don't think it's something that they're just going to put in another auction. My gut would be is like, he loves that car. He wants to, he would love to own it himself. And, if he could get his money out of it immediately, that's great. If not, he'll enjoy it for a while. And I bet it wouldn't surprise me if that is true. We would see it show up at, Luft with his name attached to it and him standing there next to it,
Yeah. And I mean, Dana's doing this at a bigger level. It's no different than me. I became a car dealer, not because I grew up going, man, I want to be middle management at a car dealer. I grew up wanting to drive as many cars as possible. And you get down to 2 options in my book, because I didn't have the DNA or whatever. I was either going to be a valet parker or own a vintage car dealership. And, even this Japanese thing we're talking about.
Oh, don't ruin it. Don't
American.
ruin it. They're supposed to guess.
All right. So even that, on a much smaller scale, I bought that going, I've always wanted one. I want to experience it. I don't know when I'll sell it, but I'll eventually sell it. I'll be over it. I'm at that point now. And I've owned it long enough that the loss, even if it's a 20% loss, will be almost negligible because I already got my emotional investment return. So he's just doing that with 7 and 8 figures. So.
I would hate to be the auction house that was competing against Dana Meekum for any consignments, knowing that Dana is willing to pull out his checkbook. That is such an amazing, flex. There's nothing more powerful than that. And as you said, Paul, it's complete risk reversal from the seller's perspective. So that's kind of cool. All right, next question. What is the most overrated car? And we played around with this a little bit, but we have to be careful that we're willing to offend somebody, because we will offend somebody because someone's listening is going to say, that's my car, damn you. So what would be the most overrated car? And I won't make it any easier than that. Greg, you're first. I know you thought about this. You're thinking now. And
does it have to be a car I've actually driven?
No.
Okay. I had a couple actually. So, all right. I'll tell you my answer, then I'll tell you the other 2 I was thinking about. I love them. It's the first time I drove a V8 Mustang. I would love to own one, but Fox Body Mustangs.
Oh, you know what?
Right?
Those are cool.
Well,
Cobra
no,
I love
90
them,
Cobra
he's saying,
R.
he's saying the most overrated is a Fox Body. So remember, when you're sending in your nastygrams for all you Fox Body Mustangs folks, and I know Matt Farah, you're listening, make sure you denote it in the direct message on Instagram that it's for Greg, so I can just go ahead and forward it.
Yeah.
Now, so I do love them. I did a Fox Body special on my podcast. It's just when it comes down to it, and this is the thing about Porsches, is it realigned to me what is a special car, because I was so into Mustangs, and I still am. But a Fox Body doesn't handle that well. It makes a lot of noise. It's not really going that fast. A 911 is so efficient, and I really appreciate the efficiency. And you could apply this to like any of the muscle cars of the 60s, honestly. So I love them, but I think they're a little overrated. The quality of the interior, the creakiness, and again, I'd love to have one. But the other two, and Max is going to hate this too, is I think the Countach. I mean, the Countach is the most beautiful car in the world. It's the car I fell in love with when I was walking outside of Racket Power off State Road 13 in Jacksonville when I was like 12 years old. Fell in love with it. It was a spaceship. But I'll meet with collectors, and I have a guy that he's got 10 Lamborghinis, and he's like, that Countach drives like a grain truck. In the same sentence, he said, but that's the last one I'll ever sell. So,
Greg, I'm gonna give you credit. You're throwing down. You're not taking the high road. You're out there readying yourself for the bullets. Mad respect.
Well, and the third one, because I would love to have one again, is just the Dodge Viper. I think from a driver's perspective, it's difficult. It is its own beast. And I guess that's the allure. I'd love to have a '96 blue with white stripe GTS.
So you're basically going to drive the market down by telling people it's overrated so you can buy one. I get it. Crafty.
Crafty.
I had so it's along the lines of a Viper. We had the last generation Viper ACR when we lived in Austin, and it was literally the only car aside from a Vanagon that I had in high school that was brown that only had 2 seats in it. It was the only vehicle, so that Viper and that horrible Vanagon, that Julie wouldn't get in. My wife wouldn't ride with me in, because that Viper was so freaking brutal, and it got so effing hot on the inside. The air conditioner could barely keep up. The engine sounded amazing. The paint quality on it was incredible. The whole front clam was carbon fiber. And I was sad to see it go, but just for what it's worth, if you're thinking about buying a Viper and you want to have a lot of solo missions, continue. If you want anyone to go along with you in the passenger seat, maybe think about something else.
So does that mean you agree with me that it's overrated?
Yes, actually I do, because it's not, the engine revved really slow. And this was in the ACR. The engine revved really slow. It had a really nasty, I'm going to get your hate now. Direct Viper owners, direct hate to Greg, not to me. I'm just, reinforcing him. But it understeered like a son of a bitch. The front tires were too small, and you'd scrub them off. If you took it on a track, or if you did any kind of competitive driving, the front would just push off. And I talked to people who are competitive drivers, and they said you can't align them in such a way that they won't understeer. And so that was what I experienced. And for me, that's a deal killer. I'm a driver. I've tried to be a collector, but I fail every single time. All right. So those are good. I am impressed with your list. Truthfully, I am impressed. All right, Paul.
Yeah. So I'm going to just say the 5 things really quick, and you can choose what you want me to pick. Porsche 997.2 cars. That's 2009 to 2012. Porsche 993s, carbon buckets, 991.2 GT3 Touring, PTS colors, and the Porsche signs for your garage. All overrated. All overrated.
Can I pick?
I've had every single one of those, including the sign for the garage.
It's all right. That's why they're over. Not that because you owned it, but everyone wants to own these things, and the prices reflect it. Although if you look at Porsche signs like on Bring a Trailer and some of the auctions, they've really collapsed. They've really
Because a lot of them are fake. The dealership signs, a lot of them are fake, and that they're made in China.
Yeah, they're so hard to buy that I was looking at one. I'm like, I'm not. I don't even want to buy one because I don't want to deal with that. The carbon buckets. I know everyone goes, oh, they hold you in so great, and not because I've got the physique of a manatee and I look like one trying to climb out of the bucket, but like I know people of all different shapes and sizes that they tell me they love them and they're just grimacing trying to get in and out of them. And it's almost like the emperor has no clothes. Everyone's just saying, oh, yeah, they're greatest seats ever. And I sit in them, I'm like, none of you are taking the track, maybe once, maybe once. And honestly, you're probably not fast enough where that you need all that support. An 18-way adaptive sports seat is quite amazing. It's one of the best seats I've ever sat in. So I'm not a huge fan of carbon buckets. The GT3 Touring, they're great cars. I've driven them. I've sold them.
What generation?
991.2, 991.2, the first
991.2.
generation.
Okay, so we
The first
had
generation.
right? We had one of those. It was Guards Red, and we brought it to Puerto Rico and sold it in Puerto Rico. So I'm very familiar with that car. I personally love that car. I thought it was brilliant. I never should have sold it. And you're saying it's overrated, and I was
It's
a dummy
overrated because I've driven those and the winged cars, and they're the same fundamental car. And the price you pay to not have the wing, which to me always seems strange because you have this vehicle made for all this performance and you're just going to neuter part of it that's fundamental to driving it fast. And I get why they don't like the look of it. I've seen people take their wing off the 991.2 and it's basically the same car, especially from a driving experience. And you're talking a 30% difference in value, 35%. I don't know what it's a significant value difference between a winged manual, not a PDK, but a 991.2 winged car with a manual versus a GT3.
Give us some prices. So if I want to buy a 991.2 GT3 winged car in a Touring, what's the difference in price now?
I would say like a 15,000 mile, same color, probably 220, in the 220 to 230 range for a 991.2. There was touring.
Yeah.
Touring. And then as a wing car, that's probably 185, 190.
All right. Would you rather have a 73 911S that's a solid 2 to 2 plus coupe, or would you rather have that 991.2 GT3 wing car? If you had to choose one, what would you choose?
Oh, yes, they're yes.
Greg,
I think it's just a unique enough experience. That's why.
How about you?
I would probably choose a GT3.
Yeah, I would do the old car too. I would, just because I've had all those newer ones, and they're the great experiences, but the uniqueness of the old cars are definitely something that to behold. They're definitely special. Yeah. All right. So I think I have the best answer.
Wait. I want to hear his answer. What was it? The 991.2 you were going to beat up?
The 991.2 GT3 Touring. Just that. And it's not because it's not a good car. It's a great car. It's overrated. You pay a huge premium to not have a wing. That is it.
I'm getting my generations wrong here. The 2009 to 12.
18. No. So the 991.2 GT3 Touring is 2018 and 19. The 997.2 is, everyone says, the last analog. 997.2, 2009 to 2012 manual. The prices are high, not because they're a great, marginally better experience. It's because of economics. The supply is so low for 997.2 manuals because you had no one was buying luxury goods. The economy took a crash. The PDK came out, and that was the new darling. Everyone wants the latest and greatest, dual clutch, this and that. So there was just a very small number of manual transmission coupe 997.2 generation cars made. So it takes the tiny, like, to give an example, I would say one of the grail cars of that is a 997.2 GTS two-wheel drive coupe manual. We sold the four-wheel drive one recently with, I want to say, 25,000 miles for 125 grand. Lovely car. Lovely car. You can go get that same exact car as the next generation as a manual, everything identical for probably 20 grand less. And fundamentally, it's a significantly better driving car. Does everything better. And I think they're just as engaging. So,
all right, I got another question. 997 GT3 RS versus a 991.2 GT3 RS. Greg, that one might be something you have to pull up on the computer because this is high Porsche nerd right now.
It is.
Okay. Because I've had both of them and I have my opinion. So
because you can, that's the only one you can get a manual. The 997.2 is the last manual.
Let's say manual to manual. Oh, no, you're right. Because you can only get the RS and the PDK. All right. So you're going to say the manual car. That's what you're going to say.
It'll always do better. It's just a different experience. I mean, they don't make a GT after 997.1, which was 2008, 7 and 8. That was the only GT2 with the manual. But none of the RSs after the 997 generation came with a manual. So the comparison would be really a 991.2 2018-19 GT3 manual car with a wing, and a 2010 or 2010 or 11 GT3 base GT, because they came one way, wing and a manual. And I would say those two cars are almost the same price. I would say high 170 to 190, depending on miles condition, but they're almost the same price. I think the 997 is ultimately going to way outpace it because the production number is tiny, and that is arguably the last analog kind of Porsche.
Well, also people wax poetic there. You and I were talking about funny things to say, right?
Yeah.
About the Metzger motor too, because in the and then the newer one, they Porsche, it was a different motor. But yeah, we're on the same page. So again, this is high Porsche nerd. Sorry for boring you, Greg.
That's okay.
What time do you guys have? What time do you guys have to bounce? Remind me how much.
I got 15 more minutes.
I got to bounce pretty quick.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
All right. So
did you want to talk about the most current overrated cars? Like what's on the market today?
We didn't get Tim's.
Oh yeah, Tim. Oh, what's yours? Yeah.
Okay. Anything that's electric. Okay, there it is. Any electric cars are overrated. All of them are overrated. And if you don't believe me, look at resale values. And I don't care what it is. And I don't want to hear about your fancy this and your fancy other thing. All of them, hard pass. The market has spoken. All electric cars are overrated. Next subject.
There you go.
Like it.
Perfect.
All right. So you were going to talk modern overrated cars. Is that what you're about to bring up?
I mean, I don't know if we were still done with the overrated because the only other one I was going to do is the new Carrera T. I think Carrera T has jumped the shark. The use of the Model T on Porsche's brand to further segment the modern cars. Like you had a base Carrera, you had an S, you had all these variations, and they figured out how to slice the pie a little thinner with this T, which when it jumped the shark, it became a Macan T. You can get other variants in a T, and it was already a crappy, name for what the car was. But the car was really unique. And I think it's sadly gone away from. I think they had this moment that they absolutely stumbled on as Porsche, creating this T, and then they just sort of, gave the brand away, used it on a bunch of things. No one knows what it meant. Diluted, something they didn't even understand to begin with. But they did build, I do think the 1819 Carrera T is a very special car. I don't know if it'll ever be hyper collectible, but I think it'll always be kind of a cult classic for enthusiasts.
Yep. Well, the early long hoods, weren't the RSRs made from T chassis?
No, so the two T's that
I'm thinking ST. I was thinking
so there was the 68 911 TR, which was a T for for touring, but it was really the base you started with to build a Trans Am competitive car. And then you had the ST, which was S Sport touring trim, and the people don't really understand what an ST was because Porsche never called it an ST. You would call I want 471 flares on it, which meant you want wider flares. It was just a sport purpose package that afterwards people would call it an ST. It wasn't. It was never a Porsche. It was never an official Porsche model until currently.
There's some pretty stout Porsches on the show field here, including an ST.
Which ST? There's only like 30, 40. It's hard to say.
I'll take a picture and send it.
Yeah, definitely.
Just put it on Instagram. Put it on Instagram. So that might be, I don't want to make you late because I know you have a client meeting.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we had one other lingering question about what 3 cars you guys would suggest for me to get for myself for my birthday, which is tomorrow. I'll bring a trailer, but we can hold off that unless you guys want to do it today. It's up to you. If you guys don't have time, perfectly fine.
Now let's save that. Now we can look at it. Now I want to, figure out something appropriate.
Yeah, I am by appropriate. I'm assuming that I'm going to be getting a Fox body Mustang, a Viper,
or the two put together, front and back ends.
Yeah, why not? Right? I think Greg posted a picture or sent us a picture of a dual engine Miata or something. Was that you, Greg?
Yes, nuts.
Well, so guys, we're going to wrap for today. These guys got to get back to work. So thank you for listening to Full Throttle Talk. Remember to like and subscribe. Please continue to support us in doing what we're doing. Hopefully we continue to entertain you guys. We love the questions, show topics, anything that you would like us to really focus on. These guys are obviously experts in valuing things that go beyond just what you can get on Haggerty or someplace else, because they're actually having their finger on the pulse of the market. So if you've got something that you want them to appraise, post a picture on Instagram, direct message us, let us have at it, and they'll be nice. Except Greg was kind of mean today to Fox body Mustang owners. And make sure when you message us, it's to Greg, not to me and Paul, because we love Fox body Mustangs for sure. Right, Paul?
Oh yeah.
It's totally Greg. I can't believe you're so rude. I can't believe you said that.
I would love a conjugal visit with a Fox body Cobra R. I just need a week. Just a week.
That's all you need.
Well, anyway, I'm getting over influenza A, so I'm doing my best. You guys have a fantastic day. And thank you, listeners. And again, we'd love the feedback. So let us know what we can do to make the show better. Have a fantastic day.